Hashem's loving grace. Today's lesson is entitled Doorstep Delivery. And now we're going to learn divine direction about making a living. Last week, we learned divine direction and making a match. So what's the connection? After we've learned about divine direction and soulmate, once again, divine direction, in case you're new, this in Hebrew is called hashgacha pratis. Many people translate it divine providence, but most people don't understand what divine providence is. Divine providence is Hashem's personal divine direction and intervention of our lives. Just like a director directs a play and directs all the actors and decide who's going to be where and what on the stage. That's exactly what Hashem is doing personally, intervening in every part of our lives. It's not like what people think, that Hashem put the world into action, created the world, and now he's retired. Hashem is not retired. Hashem is actively involved in every aspect of creation, from the greatest macro to the tiniest micro. Okay. So what's the connection between earning a living that we're learning about this week and finding a soulmate that we learned about last week? Well, our sages in the Gemara, they compare both as difficult as splitting the Red Sea, because every loaf of bread that a family brings home, and every match we learned this year, it has a profound effect of all of history. But the way we make a living, this also has a profound effect on all of society. We're going to learn about that. And when we do what's good for our own soul correction, what's good for society, what makes the world a better place, we enhance our living. So let's begin with an important spiritual principle. Be careful, I'll say this slowly, but I want you to understand this. It's simple, but it's very deep. Hashem's divine direction is above nature. In other words, what we see going on, natural, even nature, in Hebrew, the holy tongue is teva. And hateva, if we the letters, they add up to the same 86 as Elohim. So we say that the stern judgment name of Hashem, which is Elohim, that is in nature. Nature is a result of stern judgment. Now, Hashem can, if he wants, put the world in automatic pilot and let everything go according to nature. But it doesn't go according to nature. Hashem hides himself within nature, just like the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the name, the holy, ineffable name, hides itself in the name Elohim. This is the name of divine compassion that clothes itself in this world in the name of stern judgment. So it looks like the world is tough, but behind everything is Hashem's compassion. So we look, this is why Rabbi Nachman of Breslov and the Baal Shem Tov said axiomatically there's no bad in the world, because if we look at the creator and we look at the source of divine direction, everything is intrinsically good. So all for our best. Okay, so divine direction is above nature. Guess what else is above nature? Emunah is above nature. So the more we uplift ourselves in Emunah, and the more we strengthen ourselves in Emunah, the more we personally see Hashem's divine direction, and the less we suffer from a hester panim, which is a concealment. Hashem conceals his light. And why does Hashem conceal his light? He conceals his light because Hashem doesn't want to burn a person. You wouldn't want to put 1,000 watts of electricity in a 50-watt light bulb. It would burst. Same thing. Hashem doesn't give us more voltage, spiritual voltage, what we can handle. So the more we make ourselves vessels worthy of a higher spiritual level, we benefit divine illumination, and the more we feel Hashem's divine direction in our lives. This really makes us happy. Okay, and this enables us. What happens when Hashem conceals himself less? The less that Hashem conceals himself, the more we see his hand and everything going around. We're learning about this tonight. Okay, so this also cancels the primordial curse. There's the primordial curse in Genesis chapter 3, verse 19, that by the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread. When this is in the lack of emunah, if a person strengthens himself in emunah, then the curse falls by the wayside. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story about a famous Hasidic Rebbe, Rabbi Zusha of Anepoli. Rabbi Zusha was the brother of Rabbi Noach of Lizensk, the holy Noam Melech. They were both the prime students of the Maggid of Mezrich, who was the prime disciple of Baal Shem Tov. So this is the second generation of the Baal Shem Tov students. And Reb Zusha, he lived in Annapolis in the middle of Ukraine. And I believe I had the privilege of being there by his gravesite, but the Maggid of Mezrich is very right next to him. Okay, and this was the home of the greatest tzaddikim of that generation. So Reb Zusha's entire life was Devakas. What's Devakas? Devakas is total clinging on the Almighty. Total clinging on the Almighty when a person is he upholds what King David says in Psalm 16, Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, that wherever I go, I look at Hashem's holy name. I look at the 4 letters of Hashem's holy name. And wherever I go, I see Hashem. Anything's going on, I see Hashem. This was the level of the Baal Shem Tov. This was the level that the Baal Shem Tov passed on to the Maggid Mezrich. And this was the level that the Maggid Mezrich passed on to Rebbe Zusha and to the Omer Melech and Rabbi Aaron Karlin and to the Baal Tanya and his main students. But Rebbe Zusha especially was known for his trust in Hashem. Rebbe Zusha, he didn't do anything. His whole life was his service of Hashem. Was learning and praying. He would spend days out in the woods, just in solitude with Hashem. He would spend hours in the study hall. He wouldn't lift his head up from his Torah learning. And he didn't bother. He didn't worry about an income, didn't worry about anything. He figured he's serving the king. The king worry about that. So anybody that didn't know Rebbe Zusha would be amazed if they come into the study hall, what we call the shtibel. The shtibel is the little the neighborhood. The shtetl is a hamlet. Yiddish word shtetl is a hamlet, and shtibel is the little synagogue and study hall. So Rebbe Zusha in Anipoli, you can always find him in the shtibel. If anybody want to find Rebbe Zusha, they could find either the shtibel or out in the woods. If it wasn't the shtibel, he'd be out in the woods. Okay, so he would go all day long without eating, without drinking. He'd be immersed in his studies. But after the morning prayers, he would look up to the sky and he'd say in Yiddish, Ribbon Shalom, Zisha Zingrik. He talked about himself in third person. He didn't say for first person. No, first person was only Hashem. That's only Hashem. He talked about himself, great third person. He says, hey, Hashem, Zusha's hungry. Zusha's hungry. As soon as he would say that, the window next to his place in the study hall, the window on the south side, the south wall of the study hall would open up. And the gabbai is the beadle, the caretaker of the shtibel. He would put a tray through the window, and the tray had a half a loaf of black bread, and it had a carafe of water, and a little, what's called a chainik, a little Russian tea kettle, and had some black tea, black Baltic tea, type that you drink in the Ukraine and in Turkey and then around the Black Sea area. Okay, this was his sustenance. He had a half a loaf of black bread and a carafe of water and some black tea, and he was fine. And that's it. This happened every day at a certain time after the morning prayers. As Zusha would remember and to feel, his stomach would remind him, Rebbe, we're still human, even though we're close to the level of Asia, we're still human. We need something to eat. Look up, Zusha's hindering. Master of the world, Zusha's hungry, master of the world. And the window goes up, and in slides the tray, right as on cue. Well, and a haughty guest once came to Anipoli, and this guest was a scoundrel. And he saw this, he was visiting a relative, he had a relative in Anipoli, and he came to pray in the morning prayers. He was visibly with the outer trappings of being an observant person, but he wasn't a nice person. And he saw this exhibition of what would happen in the morning, after the morning prayers. Zusha would look up in the stair, up in the sky, master of the world, Zusha's hungry, go right back to his Gemara study, and in would come the tray, right would come the tray. So he says, what is this ridiculous? He says, he was a member of what was called the Misnagdim. They didn't believe in the Hasidim. They didn't believe that the Hasidim were the real deal, like the Baal Shem Tov and his students. And they scoffed at them. And anytime you have a person scoffing at another human being, anyone, this is something that's a quick barometer. If you know that a person is a scoundrel or not, a person cannot be an upright, moral person if he scoundrels at any other, if he scoffs at any other human being. You know why? Because every single human being was created in the Almighty's own image, and every single human being is a creation of the Almighty. So when you scoff at another human being, you scoff at the Almighty. Well, this scoundrel was not only scoffing at another human being, he was scoffing at one of the tzaddikim, one of the great righteous men of the generation. And he said, look at this show, putting on the show that he believes in the Shem. And I know that beetle, he sends in the trade, he sends it. Well, he says, I'm gonna put a stop to this farce. So he went and he, not much a caretaker of a little shtibelmek. He was also a destitute. So the scoundrel says, listen, I have an important errand to run, and I want you to run it for me. And I want you to go to the post office and post a letter tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'll pay you 20 rubles. 20 rubles, 20 rubles a month's salary. So 20 rubles. But then he started thinking that the gabbai, he says, well, who's going to bring his tray to Reb Zusha? He says, don't worry. The scoundrel says, I'll bring him. I'll take care of it. You tell me what to give him, and I'll give it to him. So the beadle agreed. The caretaker agreed. And the next morning, right time, he was not there. He was not in the shtibel. He went off to the post office. And meanwhile, the scoundrel is looking through the window, and he wants to see what's going to happen. Well, at the exact point, at 9 o'clock in the morning, after the morning prayers, Zusha looks up and he says, Master of the world, Zusha's hungry. Nothing happened. Zusha goes back to his Gemara studies if nothing happened. And then 20 minutes later, he looks up again. He said, Master of the world, Zusha's hungry. And oh, this guy's rubbing his hands together. He's really having glee on. See, I'm going to prove right now, pretty soon, that this whole myth of the righteous tzaddikim and the righteous chassidim, it's going to be dispelled. And he was just about to prove himself correct when all of a sudden a man runs in the rear door of the shtibel, and he lays down a tray on the table in front of Reb Zusha. And on this tray, I've never seen anything like that. It's got a loaf of the finest bread. It's got cheese, eggs, vegetables, delicacies that you normally don't find in Anipoli. It had butter and sweet cream. Who could afford sweet cream unless you had your own cow? And had all of the kettle of an aromatic black tea, but with honey. And then, so Reb Zusha got his tray, and he washed his hands, and he ate, and then he fervently said, Birkat HaMazon, he said the grace after meals with the same dveikus, the same fervor that he would say over a little piece of black bread. Well, the person who gave Reb Zusha the tray, he now returns and he sits down and he speaks to Reb Zusha. Well, the scoundrel's watching through the window. He doesn't hear what they're saying, but he sees that after they finish talking about 5-7 minutes, then the person that gave the tray, he kisses Reb Zusha's hand and he gets up and he leaves. Well, the scoundrel laid an ambush for him and he said to him, hey, who are you? Who told you to come here with a tray at this time? And the benefactor said, no one did. I did it on my own initiative. So he says, the scoundrel says, what were you talking about to Rebbe Zusha? He says, I was asking him to forgive me. And then the benefactor explains, yesterday I was walking on a bridge over the Bug River right outside of Anipoli, and it's a very narrow bridge, only one person could pass. And I had a few drinks and I was feeling no pain. And I saw this old man in the tattered clothes. I'm not from Anipoli, I didn't know him. And I figured I'd have some fun, and I didn't let him pass. So I went, he started on the bridge first, he had the right of way, but I took it, I said, get out of my way. And he wasn't paying attention, he wasn't even focused. And I threw him in the water, had a great laugh throwing the water. Then when I came into Anipoli, he was laughing. He went into a pub to get something more to drink, and he used to laugh. And they said, what are you laughing about? He says, this old guy with the black boots and the tattered brown coat. He tells him what he said, I had a good laugh. You what? Even the drunkards in Anipoli, they had reverence for Rebbe Zusha. Everybody knew he's the greatest tzaddik of the generation. He and his brother, the Noam Elimelech. He said, you did what? He said, do you know who you threw in that river? It's like you threw Moses in the river. You threw Abraham in the river. You threw King David in the river. Are you crazy? They said, hey, mister, your life isn't worth a bent copper coin. You better do something fast. What? The guy, he was faint. He didn't know what to do. He says, what's he going to do? So he didn't sleep all night long. And he decided he's got to do something to placate Rebbe Zusha. So he got up after not sleeping as soon as it was daybreak. He's putting together a tray and going and buying and searching for the best delicacies. He made this tray for Rebbe Zusha, and to placate him, he gave it to Rebbe Zusha for breakfast. And Rebbe Zusha ate it, and we saw when Rebbe Zusha finished saying the grace after meals, then he came and asked forgiveness. And Rebbe Zusha smiled. He said, there's no need for forgiveness because You didn't do anything wrong. He said, what do you mean I threw you in the river? He said, no, Hashem threw me in the river. You happened to be there. Okay, so you were Hashem's messenger. Hashem did it. Hashem decided that I needed to be dumped in the river. Okay. So he says, oh, but forgive me. He said, of course Zusha forgave him. This is what was Reb Zusha. He was so godly. He was so connected to Hashem. He did not have an angry bone in his body. No negative emotions. And he was poor. And he was completely reliant on Hashem. Completely said, what is the barometer of Emunah? And we'll rehash at the end of tonight's shur that the barometer of Emunah is when a person is happy with his or her lot in life. Zusha was immensely happy with his or her lot in life. Once a person went to the Maggid of Mezrich and then complained about the difficulties in life and difficulties. So he says, you should go to Anipoli and go meet Reb Zusha, because no one's got a more difficult than life is. So he went to this person who went to see Reb Zusha, and he complained to Reb Zusha about all his difficulties. And Reb Zusha says, I don't understand what you're talking about. So what do you mean you don't understand what I'm talking about? The Maggid sent me here. He said, I don't know, I've never had any difficulty in life. You can't imagine, he didn't know where his next meal was coming. He said, never had any difficulty in life. He was all happy. He's completely clinging to Hashem. So Rabbi Zusha's unswerving emunah and divine direction, it gave him the confidence that he'd never lack his needs. So even if the scoundrel would take the caretaker would take his normal messenger, okay, Hashem's got plenty of messengers. And Hashem engineered all this in divine direction, precision divine direction, so that Zusha would get his meal the next morning. This is outright miracles. But when a person lives on a level of emunah with Hashem that Zusha did, it says nature means nothing, because emunah is above nature, and Hashem can engineer whatever miracles he wants. You think this is a story? It's this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion, Parshat Bashalach. In this week's Torah portion, we learn the story of the manna that's called Parshat Haman. The story of the manna, the heaven-sent bread. Now, what do we learn? This is chapter 16 of Exodus. You want to look at it? It's verses 4 to 36. By the way, saying Exodus 4 to 36 every day, Parshat Haman, it is a wonderful home for a good income. It's a person, the Gemara promises that anyone that says Parshat Haman every day will never, ever lack an income. People that don't do it this week, Tuesday, was as they say it 3 times over, twice in the language of the Bible, Holy Tongue, and then once in Aramaic and Targum, Shnei Mikra and Echad Targum. Okay, but there's something that people say every day to invoke a good livelihood, right? So Parshat Haman is the story of the manna, the heaven-sent bread. Well, this was the heavenly sustenance that Hashem fed the children of Israel when they were sojourning 40 years in the Sinai desert. And if you ever visit the Sinai desert, you won't find anything but rocks and sand and barren mountains. Maybe close to the Red Sea, there's an oasis here and there, and you see date palms here and there. And if you live by the sea, there's fish. But in the desert, there's nothing. It's barren. So the Midrash tells us that in the desert, in the midst of the holy, it's a holy, holy, holy place. Look what happened. This was the time, the 40 years that the children of Israel left Egypt and were on the way to the land of Israel. When Moses dies and Joshua takes the children of Israel into the land of Israel. All right, but in these 40 years, what did they have in the desert? They had the Holy Tabernacle. They had the divine presence. The divine presence was a cloud, a heavenly cloud during the day, and it was a pillar of fire at night. And they had the Holy Tabernacle with a divine presence, with Moses and Aaron. They were on a tremendous level of holiness. Okay, so everyone, despite people had different levels. Even back then, not everyone was on the same level of emunah. So how could you couldn't fake it back then, fake that, you're a righteous person, because the manna was set in 3 different ways. The Midrash tells us that the righteous people would get the manna delivery right to their doorstep. Let's name it tonight's show, Doorstep Delivery. The righteous person, just like Zusha, got his tray in the window. He did not even have to get up from his Gemara, didn't have to get up from his study table, got the tray right through the window. And you can see this today. There's some people that have a pleasurable income. They don't have to leave their house. They go and they turn on the computer and they've got their income, and they go, some people have pleasurable income. And other people, the intermediate people, that they were 50% righteous and 50% not. They had to take maybe about a kilometer walk, a half-mile walk, to pick up their portion of manna, heaven sent bread. But the transgressors, they had to walk every day for miles and miles and miles to gather their manna. Now just imagine the connection between this and shidduchim. Okay, if somebody offers you a good match with a family, the first thing you'd ask is, where does that family get their manna? Do they get it at their doorstep? Oh, yeah, that they're an upright family. And do they take a walk for a half a mile? Okay, they're an average family. Or do they have to go long enough? Be careful of families like that. And nobody would make a match if you weren't on their, at least their same level. So the reason that reciting the account of the manna is so conducive for an income, because it reminds us, not just back then, but even today, you think you bought your bread in the supermarket. The bread that you bought in the supermarket, it's also heaven sent. When you look at all the miracles, we learned this, we studied bitachon, we studied trust in Hashem. How many miracles Hashem does in order to put a loaf of bread on our table, the growing the wheat and the rain and the harvest and the production, and miracle after miracle after miracle. And by the time it's big. So the Parshat Aman is the Torah's template for a stress-free income. So Hashem gives us free choice. We have free choice. You don't have to have emunah. You don't have to believe in Hashem. Okay, but you have free choice. The Torah says you have choice to invoke a blessing or to invoke the opposite. A person that follows the laws of Torah invoke a blessing. A person that does divine will invokes a blessing. You can understand with your own children. Your own children, you want your children to do what you tell them to do, and this invokes your love. When your children go against your word, you're not happy about that. You're not smiling, happy, unless you don't have no control over your children. Well, Hashem has control over his children. So Hashem lets us have our own free choice. We can decide, Hashem decides whether we're going to have blue eyes or brown eyes. Hashem decides whether they're male or female. Hashem decides whether they'll be tall or short. Hashem decides whether they're going to be blondies or brunettes. But Hashem doesn't decide whether they're going to be righteous or not. This is our decision. As Gemara tells us, this is our decision. Hakol b'dei shamayim chutz miyirat shamayim. Everything is in the hand of Hashem other than the fear of Hashem. And we decide whether we're going to fear Hashem, fear the Torah, and go according. When I say fear, I mean awe. I don't mean troubling. It's like that bolt of lightning is going to come out. No, it's not. That Judaism is not hellfire and brimstone. Emunah is not hellfire and brimstone. And Emunah is for all mankind. So Hashem gives us the free choice. Hashem gives, we can have a pure and steadfast belief in the Almighty. And that's going to evoke us a great income, fantastic income. And it's especially important. So the more we have emunah, the more we have above nature. Now, look what's happening in the world now. It's just big economic problems, pandemics, and the pandemic just goes. It gets stronger and stronger. Now in Israel, it's like a wildfire. It's crazy. And I understand the United States, the same thing. And the government has lost control completely. They don't know what to lock down, not to lock down, send the kids to school, not to send the kids to school. We send our kids to school under all circumstances. And with the vaccination, that's even a bigger chaos. One of our future lessons, I don't know if it's the next week or the week after, we're going to talk about a divine direction in our health. That's important, especially now. So Parshas Aman begins with Hashem telling Moses, I shall rain upon you food from heaven. So let the people go out and gather each portion daily, so I can test them whether they shall follow my Torah or not. So Hashem is revealing that our whole test of income is not whether we're going to make money or not whether we're going to have a successful career or not, but whether we're going to follow Hashem's Torah or not. Okay, Hashem is giving the children of Israel a lesson in emunah and a lesson in trust, emunah and bitachon. Okay, so Rashi explains, this is Rashi, it's on check for Rashi, that if people will trust Hashem and live according to his commandments and his ordinances, then they'll have their daily bread effortlessly. like princes and princesses in the royal palace. So all you have to do, if you're Jewish, you follow the Torah. And if you're not Jewish, you follow the 7 Noahide mitzvahs, basically the 10 commandments for all mankind. And that's a blank check signed from Rashi that you have a fine income. So emunah and bitochon, which are complete belief and trust in Hashem, and especially in Hashem's precision, daily, tailor-made divine providence and divine direction, this is the key to a pleasurable income. There's no other key. Because if a person like Reb Zusha trusts Hashem to the extent that his daily bread will be delivered to his doorstep, if you believe that your daily bread will be delivered to your doorstep, just like food from heaven, just like the children of Israel, Hashem hasn't changed anything, then you'll have an effortless income. Because then you'll be able to channel your energies in what you're supposed to be doing. What you're supposed to be doing, your job in making the world a better place, your mission on earth in correcting the world. What does that mean? Let me give you an example. Let's take 2 physicians. Okay, one physician has emunah and one physician doesn't have emunah. Okay, the physician doesn't have emunah. He's going to look for the best paying patients. He's going to look for a clinic in the high rent neighborhoods. And then he's, don't necessarily know how he's going to bill his patients, but a lot of times they'll cut corners and overbill them and whatnot. And then you have another physician with emunah, and he wants to cure people. He knows that there's no intrinsic connection between a mission on earth and a livelihood. But this is we have to make a livelihood because we're living in the physical earth. But this livelihood, it's connected. It's a means that helps us to fulfill our mission. So not like the other guy. The other guy's gravitating to the dollar. But the second doctor, he's trying to think, well, maybe I should devote my career to research, maybe look for a cure for cancer, or maybe I should go and help people in a poor neighborhood that they can't afford medical care, or do something, all types of ideological things that's making the world a better place. Okay, so a lot of people think, they look at the modern world, looks at the second doctor, always sees a sucker. What's a sucker? The first guy, he's driving a Cadillac and he's making a lot of money. But those type of people, they can't believe in anything other than the sweat of their brow. They believe in the curse. And what they do is they just make the curse. They make the curse and they continue and even stronger, because our own efforts and our own, it's a wobbly reed. We can't lean on our own efforts. Person knows, especially now, you see people that are here today and they're gone tomorrow. People are at work today and tomorrow they're sick. And you see this happening right and left. So who could depend? And then who says that your boss is going to pay you for the downtime? The downtime, your health is not up to you. You can't, your health, just like our health is not up to us, our income isn't up to us. So physically and emotionally, when we depend ourselves, life is unbearable. Okay, so our sages teach that the opposite, a pleasurable income, are for those who trust in Hashem. Now, trusting in Hashem means that we do what He wants us to do. In other words, we don't lie in business. We don't misrepresent anything. We don't speak bad about our competitors. We don't say lashon hara. We don't use slander. And we don't use what in Yiddish is called shtick. And even people, I hate that word. I hate that word. It's cutting corners in halacha when people are doing things that are gray in order to make money. That they're gray, that's absolute lack of emunah. And sometimes people that look like on the outside that they're observant, but when they go against Hashem's laws of commerce, it's a chilul Hashem. It's a defamation of Hashem's name. It's terrible. So what we need to do is to be praying to Hashem every day that He strengthen our emunah. And just by us learning emunah together, there's nothing better you could do for your income. So when Hashem strengthens our emunah, then we are more privy to His magnificent divine direction of our sustenance. And then we could feel the wonderful feeling of an income just as pleasurable as heaven sent bread. Okay, learn that concept. Hashem goes with you. In other words, if you take a rope that's connected up top and you shake the rope down here, you'll see the rope ripples, ripples, ripples. Same thing. King David says an amazing 2 words in Psalm 121, verse 5. King David says, Hashem Silcha. King David teaches us a principle. He says, Hashem is your shadow. Hashem is your shadow. Wow. You know what that means? That means that Hashem is right there with you. Nothing is closer to you than your shadow. Well, King David's son, who was considered the wisest man who ever walked the face of the earth, was King Solomon. And King Solomon understood his father's intention. And that's why King Solomon declared in Song of Songs, in the 2nd chapter, the 3rd verse, that I delighted in his shadow. King David taught King Solomon that Hashem is a shadow. And then Chamati b'tzilcha, King Solomon says, I delighted in your shadow. Well, divine direction, what was King Solomon talking about? This is an all metaphor. Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, is one big metaphor. It's a love song between the soul and Hashem. People treat it like it's lewd, but that's not right. Even though it used sometimes, it seems what they're off-color terms, but it's all an allegory of the love between the soul and the divine presence, that the soul is a tiny part, a tiny spark of the divine light. Okay, so the divine direction is the Almighty's intervention and guidance that is close to us, just like a shadow. It's even closer because a shadow is on the outside of us, and this is on the inside of us, and it leaks outside like an aura, a person's aura. You could see a person's aura if you're really spiritually aware. Spiritual awareness, it's like bright sunlight. When your person's spiritual aware, his soul is illuminated. He's got spiritual eyes, they're illuminated. Now, what happens when this illuminates his soul? The more person has spiritual awareness, the more person has emunah, the more person has bitochon, the more that person illuminates his or her soul. Now, when do you see your shadow? You don't see your shadow at night, and you don't see your shadow in cloudy weather, dark cloudy weather. You see your shadow in bright sunlight. By the same token, this is all a beautiful metaphor of when we see Hashem, when we feel Hashem. We feel Hashem's divine presence when we have the light of Emunah. That's a bright light, and then we can feel Hashem's shadow because the shadow is reflected in the bright light. And if a person is dark, a person is agnostic, and a person's got negative emotions, and he's angry and he's not happy, forget about it. He's not going to feel Hashem, not going to see anything in Hashem. And this awareness of divine direction, when you feel it, just being aware of it, it neutralizes negative emotions, and it neutralizes stress, it neutralizes worry and anxiety. Now, cherished brothers and sisters, what would you do right now to get rid of all the stress in your life, all the worry in your life, all the anxiety in your life? And that's it. No more stress. No more stress. You love it. It's a dream. You can do it. It's within your arm's reach. All we have to do is continue to strengthen ourselves in divine direction and our belief in divine direction. And what we could do after the lesson, from always the next day, I post the replay of the lessons on Laserbeams. By the way, visit Laserbeams. That's LAZERBEAMS.com. We have a new Land of Israel redesigned and hosted Laserbeams. We moved the website from our host in the United States, had it redesigned. It's now in Israel, in Jerusalem. And it's really nice. It's easy. It's friendly space. It's peaceful space. So you can come and you can review tonight's lesson, which is called the Doorstep Delivery. All right. So we said that with no spiritual awareness, a person is rendered in darkness. And in darkness, there's no sunlight. And in no sunlight, there's no shadow. So a person doesn't feel the allegorical shadow of divine direction. And there's no void in spirituality. When a person doesn't feel Hashem's divine direction in his life, then the negativity fills the void because there's no void. So that's where the worry comes from, and the stress comes from, and the anxiety comes from, because there's no emunah there. If there's emunah, the emunah is mutually exclusive. They can't live together. They can't live together. When a person has emunah and bitachon, and he feels Hashem, and he knows that Hashem is going to give him his daily meal. Go back and review our book on our little book on bitachon, and we talk about how Hashem has fed us time after time. If you're age 30, you've had 30,000 meals in a row. If you're 50, you've had 50,000 meals in a row. So who's worried about where the next meal is going to come from? So when you're not worried, you're free to enjoy life. You're free to be happy. Now, we see this in the Torah also. Joshua and Caleb, when you have the sin of the spies, the 10 spies, they spoke slander against the land of Israel. And Joshua and Caleb, they encouraged the Israelites to be courageous and to listen to Hashem, listen to Moses, and to occupy the land of Israel. So what do they say? If you open up Numbers, the book of Numbers, chapter 14, verse 9, they talk about the Canaanite enemies, and they were mighty. They were tremendous big giants. And Joshua and Caleb said their shadow left them. Their shadow left them. That's the same Joshua and Caleb use the same imagery that later King David uses and King Solomon uses. This is right out of the Torah. It's not just in the prophets and the writings, but this is right out of the Torah. What's it mean? Their shadow left them? No, it means Hashem's not with them. And if Hashem's not with them, then it doesn't matter how big the enemy is. It doesn't matter how big the challenge is. Hashem is going to hand us the land of Israel on a platter. And you can see this. Look at history right now. In 1947, 1948, there were Jews coming out of the Holocaust weighing 97 pounds, soaking wet. They're Muslim men. They were in Auschwitz, and they didn't have weapons, anything. Then all the combined armies of the Arab world, Hashem decided they would get the land of Israel. Hashem gave the land of Israel. And this is the first Rashi, in the first chapter of Bereshit. Rashi says the land is Hashem's, and Hashem decides who's going to get it. So if a person wants to amass wealth by way of dishonesty, not going to have Hashem with him. It's going to be like the Canaanites. The Canaanites were very immoral nations. The Canaanites burned their children in sacrifices. The Canaanites, they did every form of debauchery. There was no marital sanctity. It was terrible. And on the Holy Land, in Hashem's palace, no, Hashem kicked them out. That's it. And that's why there's a law that the 7 Canaanite nations could never marry into them, can never combine in no way. So fiendish and unscrupulous and immoral individuals, they cannot feel the divine presence because they're not worthy vessels of divine presence. Hashem's not like preparing the Hilton Hotel wants to have the king sleep at the Hilton Hotel. They want to have the king of some country sleep there. So they're going to give the king a room with broken beer bottles on the floor and muddy sheets in the bed. No way, king's not going to be there. Not only that, if they do that, it's off with their heads. So people that think they're smart and they think they can outsmart Hashem. You see that right now in health. And say this, I don't like to go into it because most people don't want to listen to me. If people think they can outsmart Hashem, but we're smarter Hashem, that's going to make vaccine number 1. Then there's variant number 2. Okay, we'll get that vaccine number 2, and then there's variant number 3. Okay, vaccine number 3, then variant number 4. Now, wait until 4. Hey, with this little exam, maybe the body, it's going to weaken its natural immune system, taking all these vaccines after vaccines. When do people realize? And just they think over here in Israel that we have a government, an agnostic government now, and they declared that they beat Hashem. As soon as they declared they beat Hashem, maybe you in Europe and America, you've got Omicron. In Israel, there's Deltacron. Deltacron was first isolated in Cyprus. In Israel, there's Deltacron. Not only is there Deltacron, but there's 10 variants of it. Ooh, that the wise guys, the agnostics in the Israeli government think they can outbeat me. Okay, that's Hashem. And now the government said that there are 40,000 new cases of COVID today. At the height of the first wave, when everything was in lockdown, the worst day was 6,000. Now it's 40,000, and people say it's really 100,000 because no people are not even bothered to get examined because they want to be locked down in quarantine. So it just spread, and you can't outsmart Hashem. You can't outsmart Hashem. You can't steal. You can't shortchange. You can't lie and then expect maybe a person will look like he's getting money. And people say, "Whoa, I see all these Hollywood actors, and they do all types of things." And this, that. Oh, yeah. How many times they've been divorced, and how much they pay in alimony, and they're enjoying their money? And what about the suicides? No, peaceful life. Their life doesn't compare to Reb Zusha's life. Okay, maybe you don't want to live a life of Reb Zusha. Reb Zusha didn't need anything. But there's a happy medium. You don't have to be a Hollywood actor. Be an honest, good life. You know what happens when a person lives an honest, good life? And what we spoke about last week, Hashem, enable me to be a conduit of good, only to bring good in the world. You put your head on the pillow at night, and before you count 15, you're out like a light. You sleep like a baby. So there's another metaphor that King David uses for Hashem in divine direction. King David compares Hashem to a shepherd, and he compares us to his flocks. Well, in the world's most famous, history's most famous sonnet, Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, it says it right there, I shall not want. King David says, he brings me to rest in the green pastures, and he leads me by the still waters. I'm like a sheep, I've got plenty of things to eat. My shepherd brings me to the still pastures, I've got plenty to drink, but by the still waters. And still waters, it's not like a raging river where it might be hard for a sheep to drink from, and if he falls in, he's finished. No, still waters, nice calm waters. So in the interpretation of this passage, the Baal Shem Tov says that no matter where we are, it doesn't matter where you are. If you're in the North Pole, the South Pole, London, New York, South Africa, Canada, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Doha, it doesn't matter where you are. That Hashem is like a shepherd. And Hashem, if you go with him, and you know you want to be part of his flock, he's going to lead you by the green pastures to your source of sustenance. The green pastures, that's your source of sustenance. I get almost speechless when I think about this. When I look back in my military career in the infantry, and I think about wars, and I think about conflict, and I think about being days ahead of the supply lines, we're in the front lines, and no more K ration, no more anything. Things that happen to me, all of a sudden, a carob tree. I don't know where, a carob tree. You can live a long time on carobs. Ask Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the Zohar. He and his son, Rabbi Lazar, with carobs of water for 13 years. With carobs and fill up my pouches with carobs and carobs. This was okay. Ate carobs for 2 days until the supplies came in. But carobs, it's got fiber, it's got energy, it's got carbohydrates. You keep on going. You can keep on going. There's another time when I found a grape vineyard, fantastic grapes. Another time. This is something, it doesn't sound real, but I was opening up an ammo box and there was nothing to eat, didn't know anything. And I wasn't religious at that time. This was right before, in 1982, after 1982, when I came out of that okay, then it changed my life. But opened up an ammo box, and inside the ammo box was a can of tuna fish. How did a can of tuna fish get inside a box, a crate of machine gun bullets? I don't know. Hashem put it there. You could see in the most dire situations, there was something to eat. You could see, never starving. And it got there in the most harrowing situations. Divine direction, it's with you. And then I wasn't even observant. I was innocent. I wasn't non-observant. I wasn't agnostic, but just never learned Torah, never grew up in an observant family. But Hashem was right there. Hashem was right there. And then looking back and seeing the miracles that Hashem did for me time after time, and what divine compassion. It's unbelievable. And if I do what I do for the rest of my life, I don't know how to repay Hashem for one of those miracles. Okay. What we said that gives us a taste of Hashem's hand in our livelihood. But now let's go away with something practical. I want to give you 4 practical ways to enhance your livelihood, and they all work. They're all checked and they all work. Okay. The first way, this is easy. Easy, it's easy but hard, easy. Marital bliss. Listen to this, men and women, brothers and sisters. When you yell at your husband and you yell at your wife, you are affecting the pipe that brings down your income. Because we learn in Kabbalah that the same spiritual conduit that marital bliss comes down is the same spiritual conduit that a family's income comes down. So if the pipe is damaged, if the pipe is leaky, if the pipe is rusty, then the income will be leaky or rusty or damaged. So the most immediate thing a person can do, you can decide that I'm going to respect my spouse. The Gemara Tractate Ketubot says, well, who makes the first step? Say, with the husband and wife, they come to the marital counselor and they say, oh, let them make the first step, but let them make the first step. And I say, no, okay. The Gemara says that the husband has to make the first step, but the Gemara gives you a signed check. The Gemara says, kabdeu et nashaychu shetidalchu. That says it in Aramaic, that if you honor your wife, you'll become rich. So if we don't have enough income, maybe we are not properly respecting our spouses. Okay, this is Rabbi Nachman writes this specifically in Likutei Moran, the first section, Discourse 69. Rabbi Nachman gets this right out of the Zohar from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That's of course. So emunah is the key to marital bliss. You can't have marital bliss if you don't have emunah, because people are angry at one another. Oh, you did this and that. No, when you see emunah, you see Hashem's divine direction in your marriage, and you know that by way of your spouse, Hashem is talking to you. So if you don't imagine that your spouse is the speaker, the microphone. You're not angry at the microphone. You're angry at the person who's speaking into the microphone. Okay, that's Hashem using your spouse as a microphone to give you a message. So one thing, whenever at home, heaven forbid, that my wife is upset with me, then laser, it's time for self-assessment, time out in the field, we've got to assess ourselves. And then once I do, come back and everything is fine. Okay, so that's marital bliss. Marital bliss is great for income. Try it, improve your marriage. You'll see all types of things. That maybe sometimes just, well, I'm not making any more money, but the car won't break down, the washing machine won't break down, you'll pay less doctor bills. There is such a thing as less expenses, not only more income. And some people think that they're making all kinds of money in dishonest means, but yet they're paying medical bills and they're paying alimony, they're paying lawyers and all types of things, but they don't enjoy the money. The money does not have a blessing if it's not made in a manner that is congruent with Hashem's will. The second we mentioned 2 weeks ago is grace after meals. Grace after meals. When you say grace after meals, you are reminding yourself that your food came from Hashem. Not, well, it came from my salary and I went to the supermarket and I bought it and I cooked it and I ate it. No. It came from Hashem. So say grace after meals, and whatever you want, just acknowledge the fact, even if it's a 1 or 2 line prayer. Okay, if a person is Jewish, I suggest that they say the whole thing word for word, and a person is not Jewish, it's enough. Sit with the family and recognize Hashem and say, beloved Father in heaven, thank you for our daily bread. Thank you for giving us our sustenance. Thank you for our livelihood. We understand this is from you, and thank you. That's it. That's all you need is a thing. How long did it take? It did not take 20 seconds. It did not take 20 seconds, and this is going to invoke all types of blessings for you and income. Now, and the third, I want to elaborate a little bit longer, because the third is doing good for others. When you do good for other people, you're correcting the world. You're making our world a better place. So what you are doing, you are becoming a divine emissary, because Hashem wants the world to be a better place. Hashem doesn't want to destroy this world. He wants a world, he wants to bring Mashiach. He wants to make a better place. He wants people to be happy. So when you do good for others, you become happy. All right, you get a better income. All right, and so people that decide that they want to be a conduit of divine direction, they become agents of good. And as agents of good, the boss will pay them. Okay, so no matter what, they'll never lack, and I'll explain to you why. Every act of loving kindness accomplishes the fulfillment of several Torah commandments all at once. If you give a loaf of bread to a needy person that's hungry, you got a down and out, or a person on a park bench hasn't eaten in a few days. Okay, that's a mitzvah of charity. And the reward of charity is just when you prevent a person from falling. If a person is about to stumble and you stick out your arm and let him grab your arm, you've just done divine compassion. You've prevented him from hurting himself, from falling. Okay, and especially loving, there's no better way to love your neighbor as you love yourself, by saving a life. Okay, and then going down the whole roster of commandments that have to do with doing good for other people. There's many of them. In the tractate of Avot, the Mishnah's tractate in Avot, the chapter 4, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov promises that the fulfillment of one mitzvah, one commandment, it creates a guardian angel. And that guardian angel will protect you and will invoke good for you. Every good deed you do, and people walking around, and if you had spiritual eyes, you could see people with battalions of angels with them. Some battalions of good angels. And the scoundrels, they've got battalions of the dark side angels. That's not a good thing. So no wonder that King Solomon says in 10th chapter Proverbs, verse 2, the charity saves a person from death. Tzedakah tasil mimovet. Before a person gets in the car and drives a long distance on the freeway, and especially in the winter, icy roads and whatnot, take a coin and put it in a charity box. It could save your life. It's a signed check from King Solomon. Now, it's pretty clear because charity is involved in doing so many Torah commandments, and it makes a lot of guardian angels. They could protect you from a car crashing into you or a truck crashing into you at the last moment. So in Ecclesiastes chapter 11, back to King Solomon again, the first verse, King Solomon teaches us an equally important lesson. He says, Shlach lach machal pnei hamayim. He says, cast your bread upon the waters, because the day will come when you shall find it. But Rashi explains that when someone does an act of loving kindness with no expectation of anything in return, it's like throwing a sandwich in the sea. And the sea preserves your sandwich. And eventually, one day, you're going to be hungry and you need it, and it'll come right back to you. That wave will bring your sandwich right back to you. Okay, so I'll explain to you what Rashi means even further. You're walking along the riverbank, and you see a hungry fisherman, and you've got a sandwich with you, and you see the fisherman's hungry, so you take your sandwich, and you cut it in half, and you give the fisherman. And he says, thank you. And he was out of the boat. He didn't have anything to eat. And go even a step further. You're not only a wonderful person that loves humanity, you love all of creation. You love the animal, you love the birds. And you know that the salmon that are swimming upstream, they're probably hungry too. So you throw them a few crumbs of bread. Okay, this comes time later where you're laid off of work or you were sick and all of a sudden you don't have any income and you don't have anything to eat for Shabbat. And we'd like to have a nice fish for Shabbat. All of a sudden, on Friday afternoon, you get a knock on your door. Who is it? It's the fisherman. The fisherman comes and he's got this gorgeous, big, pink salmon. He says, this is for you. Because charity and loving kindness, this is called boomerang bread. It comes right back you like a boomerang. This guy said, Laser's got a great imagination. Fairy tale. No, it's not a fairy tale. I'm going to tell you a story right here from COVID that happened in the first round, which was in right after Pesach in 2019. So we're talking about less than 2 years ago, less than 2.5 years ago, in about April, early May of 2019. Okay, and there's a guy with a falafel stand. You can check this out. Everybody in Ashdod knows. His name is Yuval Karmi, and he's got this falafel stand in Ashdod, and people love the guy. The guy's really a nice guy, big, heavy-set guy with a big laugh, and a nice smile. And during the first wave of Corona, when the police were really strong, they were strong all over there, locking down businesses. And his falafel stand, people would come by and they'd take falafel and they'd eat it there. And it was like a buffet. Local police locked him down and they said, you can only have deliveries. He says, I don't deliver people. See, all the store workers and the store owners, he lives at what's called the Star Center. Star Center is on Jabotinsky Avenue in Ashdod. And he says, everybody comes by me at lunchtime and they buy falafel. I don't make delivery. Never had a delivery service. So they locked him down. They said, we don't care. You cannot serve people. We don't let you serve people. Okay, so the people shut him down. The police shut him down completely. And here this guy's got a family to feed. And he was crying. He had tears running down his eyes. Well, just happened. Ashdod is not Tel Aviv. It's not Jerusalem. But just happened that from Israel, Channel 13, which is a really popular TV channel in Israel, the evening news crew happened to be in the Star Center in Jabotinsky. And there was Noga Nir. Good look at Noga Nir. She was a Channel 13 reporter. She is like an anchor woman of Channel 13, really popular. And she saw what was going on. And she went to see what the commotion is, the falafel and the police. And Yuval Karmi was crying. And she said, sir, why are you crying? They were covering right about what's happening to small businesses in the corona. And he says, I can't feed my family anymore. The police locked me down and I just got no livelihood. And he said that he was Yuval Karmi is a person, a simple Jew, but strong emunah. He said, I never asked for a handout in my life. And the next day, he comes to his work and he says his store is boarded up. He has to go through the back door. And a high officer, what the equivalent of a bird colonel, it's called a Aluf Mishneh. It's a full colonel in the Israeli army, goes in the back door. And he says, Yuval, here, I want you to take this. Well, he didn't recognize this officer. And he said to the officer, he says, thank you, sir, but I never took a handout in my life. So the officer paraphrased King Solomon. He says, not a handout. This is the bread that you cast upon the waters. I'm just bringing it back to you. It's not a handout. So he says, what are you talking about? Wow, I get chills up my spine when I tell this. This is 2.5 years ago. We're not talking about King Solomon today. We're talking about Ashdod 2.5 years ago. And it was all the newspapers in the national news. The officer says, when I was a young soldier, I didn't have any money. I was a young soldier in the infantry. And every time I would go to the bus station to go back to base, I would come by your falafel stand and you always gave me free falafel. You never charged me anything for it. And I saw that all the soldiers, you gave them free falafel too. So this is all yours, came back. And the officer was in a well-to-do financial situation. And I don't know, he handed him what the equivalent of maybe 6 months' salary and put it back on his feet till he could get back on his feet. He suffered so much. I remember the Yuval had a cardiac arrest, and they had to do a bypass, but he got back on his feet. And Baruch Hashem, this is something we see. He gave so many soldiers free falafel. When he lost his income, the same officer that years ago got free falafel when he was a soldier in the conscript army, in the regular army, came back and heard about his plight and gave him this big envelope full of money. That's cast your bread upon the waters. That's divine direction. And that's the divine direction that we don't see. If we pay attention, we can see it. So the barometer, as we said earlier in the lesson, is our happiness with our lot in life. This is a beautiful upward spiral. What happens when you're like Reb Zusha and you're happy with what Hashem gives you? We can truly be happy when we know that Hashem gives us exactly what we need. If we don't think that we have enough, then we either have to check if we're squandering money, or check if we're doing something wrong, check that we're not making blessings of our food, check that we're not doing honest dealings, heaven forbid, check that our marriage needs a little bit of improvement, check the checklist that I gave you. To the four things, once again, the 4 ways of it and enhancing a living is that through a better marriage, doing good for other people, and saying grace after meals, and let's see, which one did I miss in review? Okay, that's grace after meals, doing good for others, and marital bliss. And we know this is the way. We said make sure to say Parshat Haman. And remind yourself, you don't want to say the Parshat Haman and read that said from the book of Exodus, then just say, Hashem, I know my income comes from you, and let me be with you. So that's enhancing Emunah. Enhancing Emunah is probably the best way to enhance our income. So Hashem should give us such illuminated Emunah. It should illuminate our souls, and we can feel Hashem's shadow with us and feel Hashem with us. And this gives us inner peace and inner happiness. And it wards off all negative emotions and invokes a great living. And Hashem should give each of us everything we need exactly when we need it. Amen.